Live from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York, I'm Sonali Basak.
And I'm Tim Stanivek. Welcome to Bloomberg Crypto, a look at the people, transactions, and technology shaping the world of decentralized finance.
Crypto's richest man, Binance co-founder Changpeng Zhao, learns his fate today in a U.S. court. Proceedings underway this hour as CZ faces up to 3 years in prison for anti-money laundering failures.
We will speak about the case and the price action in Bitcoin as it slumped since hitting a record high. Seth from CoinFund joins us a little later.
And Hong Kong follows in the footsteps of the United States in debuting crypto ETFs. And Australia is potentially next. The details up ahead.
All that and more over the next half hour. First, though, a snapshot of the market and a lot of red. Bitcoin lower today and down for the week. So far, 8.5% over the last 7 days. Sonali's going to have more in just a second on Bitcoin's no good, very bad month. Ether also lower today, right now down about 5.9%. We can go ahead and round that up to 6%. Cryptos have just been selling off this month on the prospect of fading hopes for the Fed to cut rates. We'll, of course, get an update from the Fed and Jay Powell tomorrow. Well, as far as crypto-linked stocks look, not much better. Shares of MicroStrategy down right now by close to 15%. The company did report earnings yesterday. It's lower, though, just due to Bitcoin being lower today. After all, MicroStrategy is a levered play when it comes to Bitcoin. And finally, Bitcoin miners, let's look at Riot Platforms, down close to 6% on the day. It's ahead of earnings tomorrow. Investors likely will be looking for commentary about how the recent halving has affected the company. Sonali?
Let's look at this month that Bitcoin has had, because what a ride we have seen. It's on pace to post its worst month since the collapse of FTX in November of 2022, yet we have not seen anything like an FTX collapse. The U.S. ETFs, remember, took Bitcoin to a record high of almost $74,000 in March, but the demand for this risky asset has been waning. And if you take a look here, you do see a significant drawdown here. The question, though, now, Tim, becomes whether this is a new buying moment for the market or whether it signals more bearishness to come.
Okay, we'll certainly have to wait and see there. Hey, let's take a look at Binance, because today is sentencing day for Changpeng Zhao, also known as CZ. We heard that from Sonali, the co-founder of Binance, now former CEO. The exchange, though, is the largest in the world, and its market share rebounding from recent lows. The company says it added more than 40 million new users in 2023. That's up 30% from the prior year. The big question is what the future of Binance looks like, especially if CZ Sonali ends up behind bars.
And as Tim mentioned, CZ is about to learn if he is going to be the richest inmate ever. Bloomberg's Mr. Elena Agafopoulou, who leads our legal team coverage, and David Gura from our Big Take team joins us now. David, give us some color around this moment here. Are we looking at fireworks in what we saw in the FTX case, or is there going to be something more muted?
I think that's a really important contrast to draw. So you look at these two individuals, Sam Bankman-Fried, who really flouted the law, obviously was out on bail and then remanded to jail during the course of his trial, remains in jail here in Brooklyn, where I am, awaiting where he's going to be sent to prison. He wasn't repentant at all. In fact, that was a real frustration, I think, on a lot of people who watched that sentencing hearing just a few weeks ago. Even when he was given the opportunity to speak and address that court, he didn't apologize explicitly for what happened at FTX and to people who lost vast sums of money. CZ is a different case. We look at the filings that have been tendered over these last couple of weeks. He did apologize to both his colleagues and customers of Binance. He said he took full responsibility for what happened here. So he is kind of abiding by the law, going through the system in a way that Sam Bankman-Fried did. And I think that's what's really interesting about this. And I think it's what he's kind of pinning his hopes on here during this sentencing hearing, is that he clearly traveled to the United States for these proceedings to take place. He's been out on bail, of course, but he's been trying to go by the letter of the law, at least at this stage of his life, and accepting responsibility for what happened with him and with Binance.
Hey, Missy, come on in here. What is the Department of Justice's strategy here, and what is CZ's strategy in terms of defending himself or his punishment?
The Department of Justice here is really just trying to send a really strong message. Like you guys mentioned, this is one of the most powerful figures in the crypto world, Binance being one of the largest crypto exchanges. And so what the Justice Department wants to do here is deter this kind of behavior from happening again. So even though for the charges that he's facing, the sentencing guidelines are around 18 months, the Department of Justice is actually asking for double that. So really the sentencing that we're going to, be experiencing later today will showcase how tough the judge wants to be on someone like CZ.
Well, what's next even after the sentencing? Is today the end of the story?
Well, for CZ, what he's asking for is probation. And specifically, he's asking for probation in Dubai. So he's saying he wants to go back where his base is. That is where his family is. And that is where he wants to be. So we're going to see whether the judge is going to allow that. And then one more thing that we're waiting to see after that is what's going to happen to the monitor that Binance agreed to hire as part of this deal with the DOJ, to essentially ensure that everything is working properly. We don't know yet which monitor it will be, what law firm will take that role, and the Justice Department hasn't disclosed it. But once that all wraps up, Binance is sort of now done with sort of having any more legal problems, and we'll have to sort of see whether any other crypto firms have any similar fates.
Okay, well, speaking of crypto firms, David, you just heard me talk a little bit about the growth that we saw in Binance over the last year, despite the legal troubles that CZ has had. Why do traders look at Binance differently than they looked at FTX?
That's a great question. I mean, you look at what's happened here and what CZ has pleaded guilty to, that's not having this kind of money laundering, anti-money laundering system in place. He obviously didn't plead guilty to, nor was he accused of taking money from customers. And I guess that's the distinction here, that there still is some faith in the integrity of this company, which, as we've seen described in legal filings by the CFTC and the SEC, is this really sprawling web, this giant network of companies. I think that's going to be very closely scrutinized, talking about sort of what happens next here and how Binance is looked at under the microscope of regulators. It still really is an opaque entity in a lot of ways. And yes, there is this board of directors now, new board of directors that includes many friends and colleagues of CZ. So I guess an open question is sort of what influence does he or his philosophy or business strategy still have on this company going forward? But it is a company, as you say, Tim, that is still just attracting a lot of business. Really extraordinary reporting by our colleagues at Bloomberg highlighting how CZ's wealth has only increased and is likely to increase more as this exchange is still widely used around the world. So it is astonishing and still a company that's kind of set apart from the rest in the industry right now, Tim.
Bloomberg's Mr. Relena Gafopoulou, who leads our U.S. legal coverage here, and David Gura of Bloomberg's Big Take. We thank you for keeping an eye on this for us. I'm sure there will be much more to come throughout the day. Now let's discuss this case and other issues in crypto with CoinFund managing partner Seth Gins. Seth, with what's been going on in the crypto industry, we kind of started off the show talking about how the drawdown in Bitcoin has been the worst last month since the FTX collapse, but you haven't seen anything like the FTX collapse. Why do you think the sentiment is so negative, and do you think issues like this still keep some people from entering the market?
I'm sure it keeps some people. I don't think that Binance per se and CZ sentencing at this point are keeping a large number of people out of the market. I think what we've seen here is the ETFs, which created a new avenue for engagement and have been wildly popular, much more popular than I think anyone's expectations, have led to Bitcoin moving up very quickly, much further than would have been anticipated with what was happening in the macro environment. Now we've had yields come back up to near their highs from last fall. We've had the dollar start to appreciate again, back toward its levels from last fall. And we're still materially above where we were at the start of the year for Bitcoin. So we've seen a very nice continued bull trend for Bitcoin, despite the fact that a lot of the macro dynamics that have been headwinds in the past have started to reemerge a little bit. I think, like, stepping back, though, the Fed is making it clear that they don't want real yields to move much higher. We're talking about keeping rates at a high level rather than rate increases right now, with inflation showing a little bit of a resurgence. So I think real yields are coming down, and that in the end is actually a pretty good environment for Bitcoin. So,
Seth, what happens tomorrow if we hear from the Fed Chair Jay Powell that we are indeed going to see rates higher for longer, or perhaps that could be the market's reaction to the press conference tomorrow? What happens to Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I'm starting to hear people ask whether we're going to get a rate increase tomorrow, which I think is very unlikely. So I think anything short of a rate increase is likely to drive some degree of a relief rally, because again, you're looking at inflation showing a stickiness while at the same time, rates are not likely to move up. And again, expectations are starting to factor in at least some degree of a belief that there could be a rate increase tomorrow.
Seth, why does that theory hold up? You saw Bitcoin hit record highs, even with rates being as high as they are. Why would there be a correlation at this point for interest rates in crypto?
So over the long run, we've seen a very strong inverse correlation between Bitcoin and broader crypto and real yields. So if we think we're in an environment where the Fed is going to have to raise rates in order to bring down inflation, we would expect that to be a headwind for Bitcoin's price. But what we're seeing is a little bit of the opposite, which is inflation is starting to reaccelerate a bit. But we're hearing the Fed say they're not likely to raise rates. What we're hearing is we might have to keep rates at this high level for a little bit longer, which in fact actually brings down your real yield. So we haven't seen a breakdown in that inverse relationship between real yields and crypto prices. And Bitcoin is actually holding up very nicely here, above 60,000. With inflation starting to show a little stickiness, and with the Fed talking about the potential for higher for longer.
Hey, Seth, I want to go back to what Shanali started with, and the idea of tying, all of this to what we hear from prosecutors and from Seattle today when it comes to CZ. For the folks who are still on the sidelines right now and they say to themselves, you know what, crypto is really only good for money laundering, it's really only good for criminals, and they read a story like our big take today, which talks about the U.S. Treasury Department asserting that Binance failed to prevent and report suspicious trading by Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and other groups. Perhaps those people are still on the sidelines now. What would you say to those folks who say, okay, well, I still don't see the use case apart from money laundering here?
So I think there are a few things to focus on. One is we've now had the government, the U.S. government, into Binance. We've had a record fine. The CEO has had to step down. The CEO is being sentenced today. We had another big bad actor put into jail last fall in SBF. So we're going through a cleansing process where the industry is being cleaned up. Bad actors or actors that weren't taking the full extent of the law seriously are being reprimanded. And we're now in a position where not only do we have exchanges that are operating in a very transparent way, but when you think about the commentary that's coming out about illicit funds, the illicit fund commentary is because the blockchain is transparent. So I can guarantee you that there are a lot of illicit transfers of US dollars that happen around the world. But the reason why we're hearing about these illicit transfers with Bitcoin, with other cryptocurrencies, is because the blockchain is transparent. There are a number of companies that do blockchain forensics that allow law enforcement to actually track these movements.
Still a lot more on that to come. CoinFund Seth Gins, we thank you so much for your time. And coming up next, we're going to talk to Leigh Drogen from Starkiller Capital to talk about the catalyst he's watching next for the crypto industry.
Plus, Hong Kong debuts a batch of crypto ETFs as regional officials are hoping the crypto will help to restore the city's reputation as a modern financial center.
And last week, I had a chance to sit down with Cantor Fitzgerald CEO Howard Lutnick about stablecoins, and he had some strong words about their future in the U.S.
Americans should have nothing to do with these things. I have dollars in my pocket. I have dollars in my bank account. I have a credit card in dollars. I can Venmo you, PayPal, Zelle. These are all simple things for Americans. We have no business being near stablecoins.
I think the bigger point we're going to see longer term is a wave of tokenization and DeFi activity on Bitcoin, which is expanding the narrative of what Bitcoin is. It's no longer just this store of value asset. It's becoming a platform and an ecosystem with a multitude of apps and other native assets that can be built on top of it.
That was Amanda Fabiano last week talking about runes and the next catalyst for Bitcoin following the halving. Let's bring in Starkiller general partner and CIO Leigh Drogen about this because, you know, Leigh, even if you were excited about the halving, you've obviously seen Bitcoin fall off meaningfully after that. And even if you were excited about the potential for Bitcoin, it hasn't created that buying moment off the heels of runes that we saw that first day of excitement. So how do you think about the potential here and when things will finally turn around?
Well, I think your previous guest, Seth Gins, put it really well here. We're in a bit of an interstitial period during what is a primary bull market. And during, all of the previous cycles, we've had pullbacks of 20, 30, even 40% within the main trend. At Starkiller, we run momentum and trend following models on the liquid token universe. And we're not seeing a serious breakdown in any of the models that we run here. Bitcoin specifically, that $60,000 level also happens to be the volume weighted average price from the bottom after the ETF approval. So, as long as the market defends that price level, we're still kind of within the primary trend. And then obviously we're seeing, the macro environment, take a little wind out of the rally. It was natural that we needed to stop after basically going straight from 25 to 70K here. And then you've got the altcoin universe, which had run incredibly strong and needed a pretty significant pullback to reset. But in kind of markets parlance here, it seems like we are consolidating over time instead of price, which after the run that we've had is a pretty good sign.
Leigh, what happens though if the market doesn't defend 60,000? What if we see Bitcoin move lower? What ends up happening to the model then?
Yeah, so that would put it more into a no position or a sell. Certainly, long term, it's not a short. Over a longer term horizon here, given the 200-day moving average and the other kind of longer term trend following models. But yeah, you could see a pretty swift move down to 50K, which is kind of where the support after the ETF would come in, and then we'd have a much more kind of mixed intermediate term trend signal at that point.
It's interesting, Leigh. Part of the reason I wanted to talk to you today is because I know that you bring math to the equation here. You take a look at this from a quantitative perspective, and it feels like sometimes from the outside that you're looking at people trading Bitcoin, and it is in $10,000 increments, 60,000 support, 50,000 support. I mean, how do you think about what the real floor is here and where things can really stop the selling pressure at this point?
I mean, I don't know if this is the answer that anybody's really going to want, but the honest answer is there is no floor to any of this stuff, right? There's no real price to sales or price to earnings ratio here. These are assets that are based on a very long horizon view of growth. And at any given time, those assets can be revalued an order of magnitude up or an order of magnitude down. We've just seen, a half an order of magnitude up, and at any point in time, it's totally possible for them to go half or order of magnitude down, which is what we see in most bear markets. But as Seth said, and we agree with this, the macro environment doesn't really look like you should be throwing a ton of fundamental sell pressure on an asset like Bitcoin right now. For Ethereum and some of the other altcoins here right now, obviously the SEC is at war with this ecosystem, and that has taken a little bit of the wind out of the sails there.
Starkiller general partner and CIO Leigh Drogen. Leigh, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Well, coming up, global adoption picks up as Hong Kong debuts crypto ETFs and Australia prepares to approve them. This is Bloomberg.
Today, Bitcoin and Ether ETFs began trading on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Bloomberg Intelligence estimate the funds may amass $1 billion in assets over 2 years. Bloomberg's Annabelle Drewlers reports on the debuts.
Hong Kong has taken another step forward in its push to become a global digital asset hub. Today marks the launch of 3 spot Bitcoin ETFs in the city following Wall Street ones in January, but also the start of trade for 3 spot Ether ones, which is notable given that type is currently barred or prohibited by US regulators. The 3 issuers, well, there's China AMC, Harvest and Bocera. All of those have their origins and a presence in mainland China. Again, that's significant because trading in cryptocurrencies is currently prohibited by Beijing on the mainland. The type of demand that we can expect to see, there is question marks over that. Bloomberg Intelligence, for instance, is saying we could see around $1 billion of inflows over the next 2 years. Some of the issuers we spoke to are already saying they've seen north of $100 million on the first day, and actually the demand could go a lot further from here.
Hong Kong has a very special position as, firstly, as one of the most prominent financial hubs in the world, and secondly, it's a SAR region of the second largest economy.
Where we get to depends on a lot of different factors, including whether these spot crypto ETFs could ever become eligible for the ETF Connect program to give access to mainland Chinese investors. There's also the question of whether we can expect further products down the road, and that was something the Hong Kong Stock Exchange said that they're looking at.
We can continue to go into the physical spot assets, maybe composite types of products, eventually getting into maybe levered and inverse types of strategies.
The first step of what could be several to come for Hong Kong's crypto ETF landscape. In Hong Kong, I'm Annabelle Drewlers, Bloomberg News.
Well, at the same time, Australia regulators are also preparing to launch crypto ETFs. Sonali will certainly be keeping an eye on that development as well. Now to an update from last week's story about that Buy Bitcoin sign held behind Janet Yellen. This sign was flashed by an intern on Capitol Hill back in 2017. Sonali had just sold for more than $1 million in an online auction. The winning bid made by an anonymous buyer who bid 16 Bitcoin for the item. That's according to Scare City. In the final minutes of the bidding, an error made it appear that 6.4 million was the bid before it was recognized as a mistake. Apparently, you can get these legal pads, a 3-pack, online for about $9.
Well, I guess Bitcoin can be worth a lot when it is on a piece of paper. Of course, that is much more, as we've been talking about, than a Bitcoin is worth per dollar.
It's art.
I guess it is art. And you know what? If it were bid over on the blockchain, maybe there would have been more transparent pricing as well. Who knows?
At that.
Anyways, that's all for Bloomberg Crypto. Join us again next week, same time, same place. And a reminder, access all the latest data and news on crypto on CRYP Go on the terminal. This is Bloomberg.